Beams, Screams, and Dreams, the only show where the viewer gets to tell their truth. I'm Ashley Wiggin, joined, as always, by my husband Joshua Wiggin. There has always been an urge for us to decipher or contact that which is beyond our sensory perception. Some people may have a natural inclination to this, while others still have to work to achieve such a connection. What does it mean to perceive such things outside of our reality? And how does that move us into the future?
What would you give to see a day in the life of an ancient Egyptian pharaoh, or perhaps the first colonizers on Mars? Or maybe you'd like to see Bigfoot or a fleet of UFOs. Well, our guest tonight, Daniel, is here to talk with us about the incredible powers of remote viewing. Daniel, welcome to Beam, Screams, and Dreams. How are you?
Hello.
Thanks. It's great to be here. I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Doing
Wonderful.
Good.
Glad to have you.
Great to have you. So we come across your website, Exopsychic, and found that pretty fascinating. Would you give us a little bit of your history and remote viewing and kind of a rundown?
Sure. I initially I recently became interested in ufology maybe a year and a half ago, and I hadn't really been that interested in it until I had come across Richard Dolan's work. I found his work to be really high quality in terms of its scholarship, rather than just like I don't know, like Ancient Aliens on the History Channel or something. And then I heard eventually that his wife did something called remote viewing, and because I considered him a reliable source, I was open to these other unusual ideas, and I researched this and found that other people are that pretty much anyone can do it, that I myself am capable of it. And almost everything, if not everything you actually just mentioned about Bigfoot, aliens on Mars, or ancient Egyptian pharaohs, those things have been remote viewed. There's one document from 1984 on the CIA's website of them. The psychic Mel Riley remote views the face on Mars and its pyramids at the Cydonia complex 1 million BC. Wow. And they found were and you can go to the CIA's own website and look at these kinds of documents, and what they claim to found is that there are these gigantic humanoid aliens, like 9 or 10 feet tall, and they sort of resemble the engineers from the Alien. I don't know if you're familiar with Alien Covenant, the big, really pale, hairless guys.
The Titan.
I mean, that's basically what they look like, apparently.
Yeah, was that a part of the Project Stargate that the CIA was doing to practice remote viewing? I think that was started in the 70s with Russell Targ and Harold Pudoff.
Yep, absolutely. In the early 1970s, it underwent a couple name changes. It was called Stargate by its termination in the 1990s, and the CIA. I don't think they actually terminated it. I think that they just went deeper underground because of some of its political ramifications. I mean, if the last thing they want is for people to remote view Area 51 or right. I mean, God for, like, I don't know, some weirder stuff like remote viewing the death of Jeffrey Epstein or the last days of Adolf Hitler, and they see something weird that they might not have been accurately informed about.
In terms of like remote viewing and having an in, like you were saying, if we wanted to go see what happened in Epstein's cell, do you have to have a connection? Does there have to be a connection to that moment? Does it have to have been something that somebody saw? How does that work? How would you be able to get
target coordinates,
right,
or kind of how? Give us a rundown of how one begins the process of remote viewing, I suppose, right?
Yeah,
I think it really is all based around intention, and it sounds so weird because it's hard to conceive of how this kind of causal mechanism can work, but it's entirely based on intention. You have the so-called tasker who distributes the target, and if I wanted to get a sense of, well, one example, I taught someone who had never really taken it seriously recently how to do it. And so, for example, I wrote down some random coordinates, and these random coordinates, unknown to her, actually came from the declassified CIA remote viewing of Mars. And the coordinates were the pyramid on Mars, one of the pyramids. And I mean, alleged pyramids. I think that's what they are. They're they look artificially made. I mean, they don't look like mountains. And so I privately make note of what it is I want to remote view, and it's purely based on just mental intention that this is what I want this other person to see. And I'll write down, just give a brief account of what it is, and then I just make up some random number completely out of nowhere, like 387421, and just mentally I associate it with that number, and then I show them that number, and so they don't know anything except for the number that I've just created. They have no idea what the target is or what it might be, and they read it aloud to themselves once, and then just in a state of mental passivity, like a normal relaxed state, and then they get a mental image, a flood of sensations, and well, mostly just a mental impression of the contents of the target. And she immediately said, I have this vision of a 5-sided pyramid, and that is exactly what it is. It was a hexagonal pyramid on Mars, and that's something that pretty much anyone can do.
Wow.
And how long, or so you said in a passive mental state, does this require you meditating or going into a hypnosis or like a hypnagogic state before you are able to see these visions? Is there a lead up to that of, days, weeks, preparation and training to mentally prepare yourself for that? Or is it something you can kind of just switch on and off?
I mean, it really, it's a little bit of both. It's really not very rigorous in terms of its preparation. You guys could, having never even really thought about it, you guys could do it this afternoon if you wanted successfully. But
should try that.
There is some preparation. Joe McGonigal, one of the military's best remote viewers, he likes Zen meditation a lot. And really, you just, you sit there and relax. You make sure you don't have any internal or external discomfort or distractions. And you're not intoxicated. You're in a relaxed state. And you try to basically think of nothing. And different people, like Dr. Courtney Brown recommends transcendental meditation beforehand, and there's some people recommend different methods of relaxation. I don't do anything particularly special. I just make sure I'm basically in a relaxed state, and take some deep breaths. Make sure I'm my head is totally clear. I personally really like Theravada Buddhist meditation styles like Anapanasati, where you just concentrate on the sensation of your breath entering and leaving your nostrils, and nothing fancy. You're just in a relaxed state and your head is clear.
Kind of just what works best for the individual, really.
Yeah, and there are some people who some people do prefer a hypnagogic state. Like there's something called ERV, which is called extended remote viewing. I'm not sure why it's called that, but the Monroe Institute uses that a lot, where you enter in sort of like a trance state. There is one declassified CIA file that says that hypnosis, although it might help some people relax more, it does not enhance remote viewing. It does not enhance the ability at all. So I mean, it doesn't really help unless you're maybe an anxious person and you'd benefit from that. But yeah, I talked with Dr. Paul H. Smith. He's his notes actually became the declassified CIA's remote viewing manual, and he told me, it doesn't have to correlate with certain kinds of brain waves or a lot of the fancy stuff you hear. You're just in a normal, relaxed state with your head's clear, no discomfort or distraction type thing.
So is this kind of, would you consider it a biological or physiological activity, something that we have a capability that?
It's innate, something that you can.
Yes. Yeah, there has been some research on neurological correlates of remote viewing ability in particular, and psychic ability in general. And I think it was the right temporal lobe, which is also correlated, I think, with religious experience, that tends to be associated with it. But I don't remember. But I'm sort of a naturalist by nature. I think there's a naturalistic explanation for everything, but I think I think the natural world is a lot weirder than most self-proclaimed naturalists think. I when it comes to aliens and Bigfoot and interdimensional beings and even like ghosts, I think there probably is a naturalistic explanation for them, but it involves them like being real, and we just don't understand how that sort of thing works yet. But yeah, I mean, as far as we can tell, it's a feature of it's an innate faculty of the human brain, and it's even straightforwardly correlated with certain kinds of personality and temperamental traits. Like the military found they were really interested in selecting people who were sort of skeptical but open-minded, and that had major artistic interests. So I think the openness to experience and trait absorption, where people are highly novelty seeking and artistic and interested in just unusual, they're like very curious. These kinds of traits, what the research has shown, they tend to be correlated with better performing psychic ability. So there does seem to be, and I'm sure the CIA and all of them know a lot more about it than they're letting on. But yeah, I mean, it seems to just be something, that an ability that is as capable of analysis as any other temperamental, personality, or cognitive variation or anything.
Yeah, it's with you saying that it probably has gone a little bit further underground. I could definitely see the need for that. Given they had, I think I was still in the Project Stargate. They had, I think it was 2 remote viewers see an underground bunker, to the point where they were able to name personnel. They were able to give passwords and or code words to doors and things like that they should not have known, that triggered a massive security investigation to see how these people could have possibly known it.
Oh yeah,
I believe that was part of Project Stargate. So I think it really does, and the CIA declassifying that kind of brings a lot of validity to these claims.
oh yeah. I mean, I'm not familiar with that particular incident, but I am familiar with similar cases of. I mean, they had remote viewers who were and this is one of the more amusing CIA files. They uh, had one viewer who was able to, who described Albert Einstein and almost described his name. They said that this is a smart person who is involved in nuclear physics of some kind. And it's funny, in the CIA document, the remote viewer describes him as sort of looking like a dirty hippie, but the viewer didn't know at first who it was, but then they started guessing names. um in terms of guessing names, and like specific numbers, I mean, Pat Price, one of their most impressive viewers, was able to do that. That's really difficult. Like I mean, you have people, you always have, because precognition is one form of remote viewing. You have people asking, well, why don't you win the lottery or something? And that's because it really is the reason no one's ever done that is because it really is based on intuition and impressions. So I guess, the so-called right brain tendencies, where you are suspending your more analytic abilities. So you just sort of get like broad sensory impressions. And in terms of, if it has to, things that have to do with logic or syntax or anything analytic or discursive, tends to be a lot more difficult, but it is possible.
So with that, when you are in this remote viewing state, are you basically getting these visions that you're viewing, that you're focusing on, and then you're interpreting that message again. So you're reinterpreting a message that you're receiving and kind of putting it into order.
Well, that's the tricky thing. There's something called analytic overlay, and that happens when your left brain sort of tries to intervene and interpret it instead of interpret it and tell you what it is, rather than this sort of intuition. You're psychically interfacing through intuition with these raw, uninterpreted impressions. And one of the main things in remote viewing is you don't want to you don't want to use conceptual thought or language and trying to, like, you don't want to try and guess what it is you're doing. You're saying, well, this is what it feels like, tastes like, smells like, this is how big it is, it's vertical, horizontal, it's these dimensions. So, at all times you're trying to keep your so-called left brain from, I call it left splaining. The left hemisphere wants to tell you what you're seeing, and it's there's one human faculty is the left hemispheric interpreter module. Your brain, you guys might already know this, but your brain spontaneously makes up nonsense to fill in gaps if you don't know what something is, and that's the faculty you're trying to keep from left splaining to your right hemisphere what you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. Things like pareidolia and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
seeing things come from that area.
Oh, also the like visual tricks that they have created in psychology, where you can you could see the figure, but it's an impossible figure. Your brain is able to perceive it, but you can't actually create it. You can't build it.
Right. I mean, in some ways, I think the different modules are competing with one another for predominance, and some of the, certainly in some tasks, like I mean, you want to keep your anxiety low if you're either remote viewing or taking a standardized test, but in this case, it really is, I think, an unusual activity that because you're trying to keep your left hemisphere from you're trying to resist the temptation to guess. Yeah, like let me think. Like I had I mean, there have been a couple instances where I actually did correctly guess what I was remote viewing. I had someone give me the 2004 Nimitz encounter as the target. The stuff, the Pentagon released those videos with the
Tic Tac UFO.
Right, the Tic Tac. And what I saw was I saw it something near the water, and there was a military ship, and they were observing it, and it goes underwater, and I I thought to myself that this looks like the Tic Tac incident, and my tasker told me, yeah, that is what it is.
Would you consider that to be like maybe your most profound experience that you've had personally?
It's definitely up there with them. I was, at one time, I was given the task of Amelia Earhart flying over this island, and I had specified. It was a week before some researchers came forth and said that they had concluded she actually flew over such and such an island, and I don't know too much about the incident, but there's controversy over her trajectory prior to her crash, and my tasker wanted a specific question answered about whether she flew over, and I just said, well, I see a really barren island, and then something flies over it really quickly, and I mean, so that was pretty cool that I had accurately, as far as I can tell, gauged that. Let me think. Honestly, some of the most profound experiences I've had were on the end of being a tasker, just being able to just to sit there and know that I have not told this person anything about what they're going to view, and then they accurately describe it, especially if it's bizarre or this is kind of mean of me, and I wouldn't recommend doing this, but I had someone remote view Jack the Ripper's first victim, and yeah, I had interested me for a little bit, for a while, and I had read some stuff on the likely suspects, and I gave the target, what was Aaron Kosminski doing at the time of the death of the first victim? And my the viewer, who fortunately was not squeamish, this viewer described, somebody, they described the accurately described the cause of death, that a knife wound to the throat and something to do with a dungeon or something. But that was pretty intense.
Yeah.
Yeah, given that that person sitting down with no context of what you're tasking them with, and still coming up with that accurate thing that's
pretty great.
Yeah, it's
yeah.
pretty wild.
Being able to witness it happen on a third party has almost been more impressive to me than being the actual psychic doing it myself, because I have this privileged first person experience of I know there's no way this other person could have known that. So this is something that's public. It's on my remote viewing community on Reddit, and I published some articles on it on Medium. But I don't know if you guys recover the alleged UFO crash in Brazil, the Mage incident earlier this year.
Yeah. Pretty recently. I think they were saying it was shot down by the Brazilian military, possibly.
Yeah, that's the thing. No, only a couple of days after the incident, I had some people remote view it, and they did describe something being shot down, and some kind of basically human-looking being whom they suspected were extraterrestrial, because as you can see in the declassified CIA documents on remote viewing aliens, typically when people remote view these beings are conscious of being remote viewed, and so they can even supposedly interact with you. And so I've had people who when they remote view beings like this that look human, they'll suspect that it's alien because it's aware of being remote viewed. And what ended up happening is these, I don't know if you're familiar with the so-called Nordic or tall white aliens, but this is basically what they look like, apparently. And what ended up happening is this other remote viewer, who's much more well-known and more talented than I am, was interviewed by Linda Moulton Howe a month or so later, and gave the exact same description with the same kinds of beings, and they're being shot down and this sort of thing. So, I mean, as a matter of public record, that we got there first, but it's very cool to see this kind of totally independent verification of, usually you hear about aliens, it's the Greys, or I don't know, maybe reptilians or mantis type beings, but you have the occasional reports of Nordic or tall white type looking. I don't actually know what they are, but I thought that was, because I don't know if you guys are familiar with Linda Moulton Howe, but she's the Emmy award-winning director of, she produced one of the first cattle mutilation documentaries, and became really, so that it was cool to have such a high caliber remote viewer being interviewed by someone of a researcher of that caliber, and them having come to the same conclusions as we had. And
that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Daniel, thank you so much for your time today and sharing your experiences. And your website is exopsychic.com.
Yes.
Well, we'll encourage you guys to check that out. I know we're going to check it out.
Check it out and
see what we can see.
See what you can see for yourself. And you also mentioned you have a subreddit as well on remote viewing.
Yes, it's called Weird Remote Viewing. I can go ahead and send you the link in a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll put it in the episode description. And once again, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experiences, man.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure.
Likewise.
Hi, Joshua Wiggin, bringing you the weirdest and wildest news stories from around the globe. If it's extra normal, you'll find it here on Extra Normal News. On September 30th, a Pearl River, Louisiana reverend and two dominatrices were arrested and charged with public obscenity, which could carry a sentence of up to 3 years in prison. A passerby, Peeping Tom, happened to notice the church lights on at an unusual hour, and upon further investigation, was an eyewitness to the pastor and two women atop the altar engaged in lascivious sexual acts. Reverend Travis Clark was denounced by the church, and the Archbishop of New Orleans has since dismantled and burned the altar. The Archbishop chastised the act as demonic, demonstrating once again the confusion the Catholic Church holds when it comes to sex. I don't know, is there supposed to be an extra joke here? They fired the guy. They probably should have promoted him given the previous history of the priests in the Catholic Church. I don't have anything else. Keeping the news down south, we'll move you right on over to Tennessee, where 2 years ago, a 13-year-old Tennessee boy officially became the youngest person to achieve nuclear fusion. His family playroom became his homemade lab with, as he noted, too many implements to count. The young man's accomplishments have been verified by Fuser.net, the open source Fuser Research Consortium, and will be added to the 2021 edition of the Guinness Book of World Records. The only thing this guy's got left to do is keep Dee Dee and Mandark out of his lab. I don't know. That's the end of that one. And to take you out of this evening, adult film actress and Trump's own sexy nightmare, Stormy Daniels, has been seen around the country at different haunted locations to film a new project called Spooky Babes. The sex symbol and her paranormal investigative team host live shows on their findings and offer spirit-related services like private investigations and spirit removal. One thing we can surmise is that ectoplasm won't be the only nocturnal emissions found by the viewers. That wraps up this edition of Extra Normal News. Thanks for watching. We're very pleased to have on our next guest tonight. She's a psychic medium who specializes in the removal of entities. Coming to us from beautiful Australia, Cara, how are you tonight? Welcome to Beam, Screams, and Dreams.
Hi.
Hi, I'm really good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
For our listeners and for us, could you explain what you do in your capacity as a psychic medium?
So I basically can remove any entities or spirits from homes or people. So I do basically an exorcism. However, my work is done remotely. So I go into a deep meditation where my guides will take me through either the home or the person's energy, and I can see what's happening. I can speak with the entities or the spirits, and spirits are moved on towards the light because that's where they're meant to go. Entities, I give them an ultimatum. If they don't leave, then they're taken by my guides and taken away to another dimension and basically absorbed. Yeah, I've been doing it for quite a while now, 15 years. So yeah, and it's part of my calling.
So when you do these sessions remotely, do you require something like an item from the person who's having the troubles, maybe like a personal item from the home, or how do you visualize or get into the place where the entity is?
Yeah, so I just need an address, the person's address, and I can connect in through the home. So I kind of like do a funny Google thing, I suppose, with my own energy and follow through to the home, and then I can connect in. Otherwise, I can do it by talking to the person over the phone, then I've connected in with their energy. But sometimes the address is just the easiest way that I can do that.
And when you're working with these spirits, is that something that affects you physically? Does it take time to recover from that?
No, it's actually quite easy for me to do, and comes quite naturally. Sometimes I do a physical, so if somebody lives locally, and I will go out and I will do one physically. But because my guides do most of the work, and I do channel the energy through, no, it's not draining or anything for me.
So these guides that you have, are they guides that have been with you for your whole life? Or did you reach out at some point and make contact with them? Where do your guides come from?
So they've been with me my whole life, because I was born to do this, I believe. So they were with me right through childhood when I was dealing with entities and things. So basically, I lived in a haunted home. I grew up in a haunted home that had one entity, which was a poltergeist, and two spirits. And my father saw them as well. I get my gifts from my father. So he was a really good medium. He didn't use his gifts, but he was a really strong medium and had prophetic dreams. I don't get those, but he had sort of, that's where his gifts sort of led him. And because I had to deal with these things as I was growing up, my guides were with me through that whole time, as I was learning.
And when you discuss the entity and the spirit, are those two completely separate things, or is one more of a positive and one's more of a negative experience, or how are they different?
So spirits are a soul that has been incarnate on Earth or another planet. An entity is something different. It's never been human. And it's a range of entities. So it goes from, I don't know if you've heard of the slug-like things that attach to people and drain energy, which are quite natural to attach to people. But if you get a lot of them, it can be quite draining, up to a demon. So there's a whole range in between that people don't know of, lots of different entities.
So the poltergeist you had in your home when you were growing up, was that a spirit or an entity?
So that was that would have been an entity. So that caused a lot of problems in the home for me. My father was the only other person that could detect what was going on. However, that's how I learned how to, for want of a better word, like control an entity and an entity's energy, and use my energy to manipulate them and control them.
So the entity you had there in your home growing up, how did that manifest? How did you first become aware of that as a child?
I saw my first spirit around 3 years old, and then as I detected the entity in the home, there was so I sort of became aware of that entity as time went on, and worked out what it was, that it wasn't the general spirit in the home. And and it used to cause a lot of problems. It did attack me a couple of times, so but it wasn't meant to come into my bedroom. That was my energy space. But a couple of times it did, and there were some freaky things that happened, and things thrown at me, and I had my eye cut just above my eye, with this balsa wood toy boat thing that just flew at my eye. So yeah, there was a lot of things that happened, but I learned how to protect myself and how to control them, because that was all I could do, because I was being attacked. So.
And how long were you in the home for?
Probably about 16, 17 years.
Oh, wow. So you became pretty familiar with the entities that were there. At some point, was that entity expelled from your home?
No, I didn't realize until I left that it was as bad as what it actually sort of was. Like, I grew up just dealing with it, but it wasn't until I left that I went and saw my first medium, and she said to me, you were meant to go through that, but you're lucky to get out alive, because it was such a strong entity, and such a because it had such hatred for me.
What is one of the more profound experiences you've had with a client?
Okay, probably the best example was the first one and the first exorcism I ever did. And yeah, that was about 15 years ago. I did house cleansings before then, so I would go in, clean the house, bless the house, maybe remove the spirit here and there. But at this point, I moved to the Gold Coast, so northern Australia, and I decided I would start doing some cleansings up here. And I had a client call, and she wanted to do she wanted a blessing on her home, and I said, it feels really clean. Like, is it a new home? And she said, yes. And I said, well, why do you want a cleansing on a new home? I said, it feels fine to me. She said, oh, no, I still want to, I still want to get one done and a blessing. And I said, no worries, I'll come around and do it. And as I started to do it throughout the house, I said to her, there's something you're not telling me. There's something else going on. And she said, yeah, it was her daughter. She was hearing, when her daughter was sleeping overnight, she was hearing male and female voices coming from the bedroom where her daughter was sleeping. And her daughter had also tried to commit suicide twice. Well, turns out her daughter was 15 years old. She also stopped going to school. And it turns out that that she had 9 suicidal spirits around her. So spirits that she had that attached to her that had committed suicide and were trying to influence her. Sometimes when spirits don't pass on, they hold grudges, they hold the negative energy that they've had in this lifetime, and they stay here. So her mother was, I don't want to give away too much, but her mother was a doctor, her aunt was a psychiatrist. And so they had been dealing with this for a while, and I knew that if she had tried again, it was going to work this time. She tried to commit suicide again. So anyway, because she was local, I went and I made arrangements to see the daughter. When I turned up, the daughter wanted to leave, and I said, no, we've made this arrangement. You're not leaving. This will take 15, 20 minutes, and then you can go to your party. I said, no, I've got to go. And I said, no, you really have to say, you've got to understand this girl is the sweetest girl. I still speak to her to this day. She's a beautiful soul, lovely girl. And she wanted to walk out the door, and I said, no, you're not going, you're staying. And she walked away, and then I saw something run behind her, and then she turned around, she crossed her arms, and she goes, and her whole face changed, her voice changed, everything. She goes, what are you doing now? And I went, I'm not speaking to you anymore, am I? And so that was my first one. And I told my guides that I didn't want to do anything like this. And when I got to the lady's house and I found out, what was happening, I said to my guides, I told you this is not what I wanted to do. And they said, yeah, but if we told you what was happening, you wouldn't have come. And I said, yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's a pretty intense experience. Going out for, you said that was your first time.
Wow. Yeah.
So could you explain what a little bit of the differences are between the type of exorcism you do and something as compared to the more conventional exorcism, like a Catholic exorcism or something like that?
And that's a really good question, because a lot of people believe that it has to be the church that does an exorcism, but it's only because I've been doing it so long. The way I explain it is the churches do physical exorcism. And I do more of a non-physical, like more of a spiritual exorcism. So a physical exorcism, if you've got an entity that needs to sleep, doesn't need to sleep, doesn't need to eat, has unlimited amount of energy, and it's fighting against someone who is trying to get rid of it, who needs to sleep, needs to eat, and has limited amount of energy. This is why these exorcisms can go on for years. People think that it's just all done in one go, but these things can be once a week, once a month, where the person goes away. They've still got the entity inside them or attached to them, and then they have to keep coming back, and sometimes this can take years. And a lot of people don't believe this, but I do my exorcisms take about 3 minutes, and to this day I have 100% success rate. So I do a little bit of background. So I do a consultation first to find out whether anything's attached, because a lot of people that do come to me think that there's something attached, but there may be something else involved. It may be a past life thing that's holding them back, a karmic thing. It could be, it could be something else to do with their energy or their home. It could be anything. So I do go in and I do a meditation consultation first to find out exactly what's happening before I decide. I don't just go in unknowing. I know exactly what I'm dealing with. But yeah, that's the difference. Because my guides do the work, it's very, very quick and simple for me. I don't know how these people handle this. The physical exercises, they would be exhausting. I do have a couple of priests that I work with from Victoria that if they can't deal with things, they send some people to me. I'm kind of like a last resort for people that have tried everything else, because sometimes when someone from the church will go in and do a blessing, they most of the time they think that the person is is just a bit crazy, or just they sort of go in as a just to sort of appease them type of thing.
And is that an often occurrence for you, that you do get a lot of people that have tried to deal with that through, a more religious experience instead of the spiritual experience?
Yeah, and yeah, because I don't know where else to go. It's really hard. People find me. I used to be. Now I have my website, but I used to always just be word of mouth. And people would say, "Oh my God, I'm so glad I found you." Look, I'm not saying that the churches don't do good work and they can't get rid of these things. They can at times, and sometimes just a blessing is all that's needed, or and they will work. But there's other times where they need extra help there as well.
Does the religious background of the clients that you service have anything to do with sometimes the spirit not being able to be removed by you, or being able to be removed by the church? Is that tied to their religion at all?
No. So I have a lot of different people, a lot of different religious background. I do a lot for the Vietnamese community. I do a lot for people that are Hindu, Christian. It doesn't matter. It's when it comes down to my work, it doesn't matter what religion, and they're normally happy to working with me because I'm not a particular religion, and I'm happy to working with them and help them, because I do some after work as well to help them sort of protect their home and their family, and I do sort of talk about some of their religious icons and that as well, in how this will help. So yeah, we sort of work as a bit of a team. I think most of the time they're just happy to have it dealt with. They're to the point where they think they're going crazy, or they just can't deal with it anymore.
And within different cultures and different groups of people, do you see kind of similar entities or similar spirits?
So, yes, certain religions will attract certain entities. However, that entity can look like or can manifest as part of that religion. So I might see it as different, because its energy is what I see and what I see in my mind. If I don't see them physically, then I get an image. It's like if you smell bread. I'm probably going off track a little bit here, but if you smell bread baking, you get an image of bread baking, of bread in your head. It's the same thing when I can't visually see something, but I can feel its energy, so I get a visual of what it is.
It's a lot of what people would commonly refer to as demons, that they would have to do an exorcism on. Is that a demon in any kind of traditional sense to you, or is that just another form of entity?
It's another form of entity, and it's hard for me to determine a demon from a really high entity. It's the intelligence that makes the difference. in regards to demons, though, I did have a client that had gone to Vietnam, had gone in a religious cave that he wasn't meant to go in, and when he came out, for the next few weeks after that, he started to change. So for the last two years, he had changed. His personality would change. He would change completely. He would snap for no reason. He would, his whole personality would change. And when I saw what was attached to him, I'd never seen them before. They were the old biblical looking demons. There were 3 or 4 of them attached to him. And they were the old grey skeletal type things with wings. Well, I've never seen them before. Yet I had seen them on different pictures, in regards to the Bible and what their perception of demons were. So it was quite interesting. They were a very, very old type of demon that he had got from this cave. And funnily enough, I didn't know anything else apart from his personality. But a friend of his wife's called me a couple months later and said, you did some great work. Do you realise what happened? I said, well, no, I didn't really hear much back. She said, well, when he went into the cave, he had lost, when he came out of the first time when he went into the cave, he lost all of his hair. His hair fell out within a couple of weeks. And she said, after you did the work, his hair started growing back 2 weeks after you did the work.
When you were talking about you did do house blessings also, would that be considered like maintenance work, keeping the spirits at bay that might become attached to a person or an object?
So it's more when someone moves into a home and there's the past energy from the previous homeowners. So if there's been a lot of conflict, negative energy, sadness or anything, it's always good to cleanse the home to get rid of all that. You can do it yourself with sage, and I make my own holy water, so I use that. I use sage, but I also raise the vibration and do all that as well. So I kind of do extra work. But you can sort of do a maintenance yourself. Once a month, or if you feel like it needs to be more, you should do a staging. Especially if you've moved into a home that other people lived in previously. You don't want to take on their energy, especially if you're an empath. So I do that, but also mainly people call and say, I want a house clearing because I think that there's something in my home or something like that. So I'll look into it first, and then if there is, then we might need to do a removal. If not, then I can just go out and do the home cleansing, or I can do it remotely as well. All my work can be done remotely.
What would you say to those that would say your entity removals or your practices is occult or satanic? What would you have to say about something? People who would say spiritual removals or something of the satanic realm.
I've had a few of these conversations. I do notice some people that do physical exorcism, and they are part of the Christian religion. They don't work within the church, but they class themselves as Christians. They sort of follow that religion, and they've tried to do a few. I said, look, because basically they think that you've got something attached, or you've got something in you that is that, because I do psychic work as well, so it enables you to predict the future and all of this kind of thing. I've said, go ahead. If, I'm happy to have an exorcism. If you think that I've got something attached to me or there's something in me, I'm happy. I'm open to that. And I've tried to, because there's certain things that they say that get them to these things to come out of you, and they don't. And they've accepted me for what I do now, even though to them tarot cards, any kind of witchcraft, whether it be white witchcraft or whatever, or anything that I do is classed as demonic, and means you've got a demon attached to you. They've tried to do. I'm like, okay, yeah, you want to do an exorcism? This is on me, that's fine, go ahead. Yeah, but nothing comes of it, so they've accepted me now. We just agreed to disagree and get along. So yeah.
Sure. Well, Cara, thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. I know we had a little bit of time difference here, and we really appreciate you working your schedule out so that you could, contact Ashley and myself.
Absolutely. I think you gave us so much great information and perspective. And I think that with your information, in our description of this episode, a lot of people will be able to reach out and find help that, they might need in this kind of aspect. We certainly have talked to a few people that have experienced it.
Yeah, and with just needing their address, I think that's something that could work out for a lot of people that need a spiritual removal or a spiritual or entity removed from their home. So once again, thank you for the work you do, and thank you for coming on Beam Screams and Dreams.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me and enabling me to get out this information, because a lot of people just don't know where to turn or where to go. And there are people like me out there that can help them. It's not just the churches. We just need to be found. So anything that can get this information out there is great, and that's why I wanted to come on the show and talk to you. So thank you so much.
Thank you to all of our guests that were on this evening. And thank you so much to everyone who's been tuning in on our podcast. And thank you for all of our subscribers and viewers on YouTube.
Right. And if you'd like to contact us to share your story, you can reach out. Email us at beamscreamdream@gmail.com, or find the rest of our social media accounts in the description of this video or this podcast.
I'd like to leave you guys with a quote tonight from Socrates. The unexamined life is not worth living.
Thank you for tuning in to Beam Screams and Dreams. Until next time. Records.
Consortium.
What did I say?
Consortium.
Yeah. The Open Source Fuser Research Consortium.
Consortium.
Okay. The young man's accomplishments. Fuck, man.
Why are you trying to be more serious? I thought you were trying to have a good time with this.
Trying to put this in there. The young man's accomplishments. The Open Source Fuser Research Consortium. What is the word?
Consortium. You don't know that word?
Check this out. It looks like I'm touching this trash can. Look at all this trash.